defiance, pride, and just complete sadness and betrayal and hurt, right? And no amount of anger can kind of protect me from that hurt. It's only the acknowledgement of what a betrayal of a parental-child relationship this has been that allows me to even talk about this without falling apart, right? I mean, it's hard to explain how much work has gone into my life in order for me to discuss all of this without turning into a puddle, and to see the defiance, to see the power in this story, and to see over his fucking brokenness into my power. His brokenness is my power. His life is about his children. My life is not about him.
Watch this get censored. Malcolm X was assassinated a few months after visiting Gaza and Palestine and coming back and writing an article called Zionist Logic. And in that article, he said, Zionism have mastered the art of dollarism. And that's how they got their foot in here in America. Not only does Malcolm X was trying to break the injustices African Americans faced, he was also unifying the struggles of international people to the struggles of African Americans, because we have a common enemy: white supremacy and Zionism. Wow, surprise, surprise. After learning about Palestine and how they face injustices every day by the hands of Zionists, he went to learn firsthand. He was trying to bring light to the fact that every people of color that are oppressed had a common enemy, and that we all have the same struggles in different fonts. And every time he spoke and said blacks, he didn't just mean African Americans. He didn't just mean Africans. He meant Arabs. He meant Asians. He meant Latinos. He meant every people of color that are being oppressed by the hands of white supremacists and Zionists. Zionist Jews here in America were telling African Americans to go do protests, to go do sit-ins, to go scream for their liberation, while they were putting their hands deep in the pockets of Americans here. They were creating businesses and they were creating empires here to get their foot in. They were creating businesses in African American communities that returned nothing back into the community, and that was abusing the community in order to grow. He also talked about how Zionism had a major role in the abuse of Africa and their minerals, and that continues till this day. And after talking all about that and shedding light about all this is when he was assassinated. Malcolm X knew the only way we could win anything is if we come together and create community. If we had a common enemy, which we do, and if we identify that common enemy, that we could work towards that common enemy. He knew that. But the major thing that's attacked here in America is community, is coming together. We are so divided by class, by occupation, by status, by gender, by age, by interest, by left, by right. Everything, we're so divided that we can't even create communities. Imagine if we came together. You know that general strikes only takes 3.5% of the population, but we can't even do that because we are so divided. Do you not understand this? This is why he was assassinated, because he knew the solution, and he knew that so much influence that he had, and that he could have shed so much light into this, but this is never taught in our school. This information is never taught, and not only that, this information coming out is going to be censored. It's going to be, because since May 15, America has had a backdoor access into TikTok's algorithm, and everything that you've been seeing so far has been so censored. So much information that has been coming out has not reached the masses, and it's that disgusting. This is how much power that we had. They are so scared that they have to censor us through a dancing app. This is the power that we have, and you don't even recognize it. Shame.
Oftentimes when you know your partner's mad at you or upset with you, you have this thought error. And the thought error is, if I could just get them to see where I was coming from, if I could just get them to understand me and why I did what I did, then they wouldn't have any reason to be mad and they would feel better, and then this would all be solved. And then you enter into the communication with them trying to explain and justify and protect and defend why you did what you did, trying to get them to see that there's no problem here. Like, why are you upset? And of course, that never works to repair connection. So if your partner's mad, hurt, or upset, or frustrated, and you want them to not be, here's what does work. There's a practice called recreation. And this practice really truly is the ultimate form of love. And so here's what it is. You're here, your partner's over there. You want to recreate over here exactly what they're experiencing over there. Their words, their emotional experience, and their underlying commitment to whatever it is that they're communicating with you. When you recreate them, like literally, really truly get them, it's kind of like holding space, but it's this active thing that's in the way that you're listening to them, is that you're really picking up exactly what they're putting down. That is the solution that creates repair. When you're listening to them and you're not adding your interpretation or meaning, you're not adding anything and you're not subtracting anything from their true raw experience, the words they're saying, their intention for what they're trying to say, their commitment underneath what they're sharing with you, which is often, if they're saying, hey, I'm upset with you, what they're really committed to is feeling seen, is feeling heard, is creating connection and love again with you if it was broken. Because normally the way that we listen to our partner is that, like, I need to fix this, I need to change this, I need to get them to see my point of view, and they're over there trying to get you to see their point of view, and if you're both trying to do that, then it's gridlock, nothing happens. And so the biggest gift you can give to your partner is recreation of them, is I'm getting the words you're saying, I'm getting the intention, I'm getting your experience, I'm getting your commitment to what it is that you're, up to here in this communication. I'm fully recreating you and your experience over here in me and mirroring that back. And when they feel that, oh my God, there is a huge sense of relief. There is a huge energy release from them. They feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel validated, they feel understood, they feel you. And then connection, love, affinity can be restored between the two of you. So the solution, if you did something that upset your partner, is not to get them to see why you did what you did or explain or justify. It's not the solution. The solution is recreating them, is really truly getting them. And then once you've done that, once you've offered that to them, where you're like, oh, yeah, from your point of view, I really do see how what I did didn't work. It wasn't effective, right? Obviously it wasn't effective. It had this impact on you, and that's not what I want. And so once you've offered that, they're probably feeling a whole hell of a lot better. And there may be some space for you to be like, hey, are you open to hearing why I did what I did and really where I was coming from? Like, you may have a desire and need to feel understood. But know that that's, you sharing that isn't necessary in the repair, right? In the apology. But you may want to, right? And so if they're feeling better, they're a whole hell of a lot going to be more available and open to be like, yeah, okay, why did you do that? And where were you coming from? They might be able to meet that need for you to feel understood too. And there you have it. That is the solution. If you have any questions or want one-on-one support with this, feel free to DM me or book a free consultation call.
The idea of win rate is a very common discussion between players of games like League of Legends and designers as well. A common question I'll get asked is, August, why is every character in your competitive PvP game not balanced to a 50% win rate? The line of thought behind this question makes a lot of sense. Win rate is a measure of power, And if a character wins half their games and loses half their games, then they're the most fair, are they not? The answer to this question can get pretty complex, but I would generally say that win rate is not the end-all be-all for game balance. And in fact, a game with all its characters at 50% win rate is probably not the most balanced game or the most fun game to play. To illustrate this point in a somewhat silly and hyperbolic way, I'm going to tell you about my new champion. We're going to call him the Gambler. The Gambler has 2 passives, one for every 100 years of game design experience that we possess at Riot Games. The first passive is Gamble. When the Gambler loads into a game of League of Legends, it flips a coin. 50% chance to destroy the enemy nexus immediately, and 50% chance to destroy their own nexus immediately. Therefore, the Gambler has a guaranteed 50% win rate. The second passive is No You Don't. The Gambler cannot be banned in Champion Select. The reason I use this somewhat ridiculous example is it sparks thought. As you're thinking about this, think about things like, well, is this character actually fair? Does it feel fair? And even if this character is fair, is this a fun game of League of Legends? Do you want to play in a game that has the Gambler in it, despite the fact that it has a perfectly even 50% win rate for everyone in the match? Another fun thing to think about with the Gambler is if it could be banned, what would its win rate need to be, assuming we could tune the coin's odds, to make it so you didn't ban it every single game?
My whole message point is for us. Now, when you talk about slavery, right? We talk about systemic racism. We talk about the Willie Lynch letter, right? We talk about, the black man is God, right? We talk about, the greatest soldier in a white man's army being the black woman and the black woman being the pawn. And then they figured out early on through slavery that because they were killing us, right? But they figured out if we get the black woman or we get the whole joint. Mm-hmm. Okay. So,
you know why? Go ahead. I want you to explain why, because I think it needs.
But I get to that, but I want to finish the messaging point, right? I like to keep it cohesive for myself. I might forget a lot of information in here. So, what they did was they made the black woman hyper masculine, right? And they made you and me we're studs. We're gonna be in the field. We're handy, right? And I think. And I'm trying to connect it all because he made a valid point, right? The government empowered black women to strategically move the position of power from the black man.
Remove the power from the black man.
Right?
Yeah.
So now the black woman in that instance becomes drunk off this power, and then she has a disdain for the black man. And then it becomes perpetuated over generations. So with slavery, what they did was they take us, they call it buck breaking. They do gang bang us, rape us, cut our balls off in front of the black woman. And then before they kill the black man, they'll make the black, after they did him dusty, they'll chain him up, right? Look, they'll chain him up, right? They'll chain him up, beat him within an inch of his life, and then unchain him, and then rape and do that to the woman. And then the woman is looking at the man like, come save me. But mentally, he's dead. He doesn't even have no fight in him. So now she doesn't even have no respect for you. You fast forward to this generation, black women don't respect black men at all. And when you understand that, and it's a lot, so I'm trying to make it like simple, right? Because a lot of people, they respond emotionally and not intellectually. And there's no empathy for black men. There's no sympathy for black men. You don't even love black men. You don't even know who we are. You don't give a fuck about us. Pay my bills, eat my ass. And that's it.
Thanks.
Okay. So it's important that black men understand what was done to us and why it was done to us. It's also important that black women understand their position in systematic racism and how they're being utilized to destroy their whole family and their whole community and whole generation. Okay. Now a black man role is to be the protector, provider, maintainer, sustainer, and leader. I'm a man,
Producer.
Protector, provider, maintainer, sustainer.
Producer.
You have your opinion, I have mine.
You're right. I'm just giving it. And producer.
Yeah, right. I got you. You have what you want to put in, right? And so I'm saying protector, provider, maintainer, sustainer, right? Protector, provider, maintainer, sustainer. A woman's role is wisdom and balance. Okay. Now the black man gets his provision. He gets his provision, right, from God. And what happens is there's a vibration. It's a lot. So I'm trying to make it simple, right? So How you think creates how you feel. How you feel becomes an emotion. That emotion becomes a vibration. That vibration becomes a magnet that attracts things to you. So when you're around an alpha and you're around and you in that frequency, right? If
Alpha what?
man, right? And that energy, that frequency, right? It can throw some shit off.
Yeah.
Because you're conditioned not to even be around that shit. And then you become sensitized, not desensitized. You're very sensitive to that energy. And then now you don't know how to read that energy. You think he's narcissistic. You think, no, he's where he needs to be to take his place. So I feel like black men need to disregard how black women feel about our masculinity and be more self-contained. I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need your money. I don't need none of that. I'm not sleeping on your couch. Don't give me no keys. I'm gonna get my own. I'm gonna go to God. And when you don't want to fit my program, bye. Go.
Thank you.
You're not needed. You're dangerous. I don't want to bear seed with you. I don't want to sleep with you. I don't want to be your friend. I'm staying away from you. And there's a lot of black women that get it and they love the masculinity that we project. Black men, we project energy. Women receive energy. You see? So now for the black women who are confused, right? A woman has to lead with 3 phases of love. The first phase of love is informative, right? So she's informing that black man of who he is. She's informing that black man that, yo, look, you get your provision. You're going to be the provider. You're going to be the head of this household. Even if she's Oprah and he's broke, she's going to uplift him through the information. That's the first phase. The second phase is unconditional love. Unconditional. She's loving and she's loving, she's loving, she's loving. Then the last phase of love is tough love, accountability. The problem is a lot of our women are conditioned to lead with the accountability first. And they don't set the table with informative love and unconditional love. See?
Which comes off as disrespect and combative.
All the time.
Yeah.
But again, this is why black men need to be in tune with self. And when that woman is argumentative and she want to talk and every 5 minutes she want to get a word in and she just can't shut the fuck up, let her go. Don't beat on her. Don't catch no cases. Let her go. Literally let her go.
Yeah.
And you vet her with your frequency. You vet her with your vibration. I walk in some rooms and I get around certain black women and I start talking. They can't stand me. Good.
Goodbye.
Good. Bye.
Why is that they can't stand you?
Because I just told you, a lot of black women are not used to a black man that has confidence. A lot of black women are not used to a black man who...
Wait. I just want to clarify. You saying that black women can't stand you because of your confidence?
1,000,000%. A lot of them.
I think it's
because, hold on, because I'm a nigga. I'm a op. I'm a blood. I'm a fuck boy.
Wait,
I'm a trick.
Here's a theory I have as a clinical psychologist and relationship specialist. Having extremely high cognitive power, or IQ, is a version of neurodivergence that affects relationships and overall mental health hardcore. Like, it's not just that high IQ is commonly associated with certain neurodivergence. It is the neurodivergence. So a couple months ago, a close friend of mine and my husband's was staying with us from out of town. And he's known my husband since forever, and he's one of the first friends that my husband ever introduced me to, so we pretty much go way back. And that's all I'm going to say as far as identifying information here. But we were all having a couple drinks and we were talking casually, and this friend was like, so I went and got tested for ADHD to see what's up with my brain. So I totally missed the opportunity to attune to his vulnerability. And my dumbass response was, oh, let me guess, you didn't have ADHD, you just have a wildly high IQ, and that accounts for your issues. And my friend just looked at me and was like, yeah. Like a little baffled and a little, I don't know, like surprised that that was it and that this was such an obvious thing that I blurted it out, and maybe even confused, like, is my brain braining that much that it would be that different from everyone else and cause me these issues? So let me explain something about intelligence quotient, better known as IQ. I had to give these tests a lot in my training to become a psychologist. Pretty much every practicum and intern experience I had required me to do a ton of these exhaustive, boring ass tests. The real deal IQ tests are not like the stupid ones you see on the internet. They're very involved, and they include a ton of mini tests that go through all the different ways to measure cognitive ability. People criticize IQ because they say that it relies too much on vocabulary, and some people just haven't been exposed to certain concepts and topics. But if you think that's the case, you just take the verbal pieces out and give them something called a performance IQ, which requires no background knowledge. So I actually think it's a pretty awesomely exhaustive measure. There are subtests with spatial reasoning using blocks and your ability to verbally reason, answering why or how questions. You'll have to do simple things with numbers that seem simple, but make you keep like tons of things in your mind at the same time. There are picture exercises that require no words at all that loosely weigh in on attentional abilities. So it really gives a good idea of the person's brain power. And then I just wanted to explain, here is the bell curve of IQ. The average IQ here is 100. That means that 50% of the population have an IQ over 100, and half of us have an IQ under 100. This is average. A standard deviation is 10 points. So if we get 3 standard deviations lower than the average, we're at 70. An IQ of 70 is someone who's so profoundly cognitively impaired that they have a hard time with basic life and self-care skills. They might be confused with things like folding clothes and the multi-step process of showering, let alone paying bills or even Googling something. 3 standard deviations from the mean means that only 2% of the population has this IQ or lower. And in the other direction, that would mean that 2% of the population have this IQ or higher. So the US Army doesn't use IQ anymore, but the test that they use roughly correlates with the minimum IQ kind of in the low 80s. So now let's look in the other direction. We have 3 standard deviations from the mean, so that puts us at 130, meaning only 2% of the population, like I said, have an IQ of 130 or higher. The difference between somebody who has profound deficits in even self-care and the average human is the same as the difference between the IQ of the average human and somebody who has an IQ of 130. Chances are, you guys, you don't know somebody with an IQ of 130 or above. The doctors that you and I know, I'd guess, are in the 120s. Big brain power. Learn stuff really easily, memorize stuff really easily. The people in the 130s, though, or above, are not doctors. Or if they are, they're bored. And if they're inching up into the 140s, almost zero chance of a traditional doctor or lawyer. You know, the regular Harvard grad that you assume is a genius. This person who's 140 is in the top 99 point something percentile. That means there's only a handful of people out of 1,000, not out of 100, that have that IQ. Most of us don't know any of these people, seriously, but I've actually met them in my career and I know them when I see them. And they have relationship problems and they're sometimes depressed and they often have substance abuse issues if they're unsatisfied intellectually. Like if they're a regular doctor and not running 3 businesses, they're not feeling alive, they're understimulated, maybe feeling empty, and their brains work so differently, they often feel like they're making crazy, stupid mistakes or just being misunderstood or like not aligning with how the rest of the world wants things to be. They see everything as, how do I make sense of this? Not, how do I feel this? Just as a way that their brain works. So their partners are feeling alone and baffled, and their own relationships with themselves suffer too, because our identities and our inner worlds are not something that can just be made sense of. They have to be felt. And you know what? I think my friend is here. I'm not going to say what he does for a job, but let's just say he gravitates toward risk and complexity. These people are not the ones that studied hard at Yale. They might not even have gone to college. You saw Good Will Hunting with the How You Like Them apples. Well, this person might be so logical that they don't see the return on their investment if they go to college. I guess Elon Musk is probably approaching the mid-150s, and I'm not sure if someone like him is on the autism spectrum or if his IQ accounts for his symptoms. It does make me think. But anyway, these people, even in the 140s, if they did go to school, they're probably barely cracking the book, and they intuitively know the material after just hearing a tiny bit of it. They can look up the rest. They fill in the blanks themselves, and they're usually actually blowing off class and doing something they value more. They're not doctors or lawyers. They're starting crazy companies, like compulsively, or they drink or smoke weed to slow down the logical analysis like you wouldn't believe. And they don't understand how other people have these ways of thinking that stop to feel or enjoy something instead of understanding or solving something. But they're still human, so often they're lonely and feeling misunderstood, feeling isolated, because largely they are handful of people out of 1,000. So it's a cycle of more working or numbing that happens. And I always say I think a lot of diagnoses are lacking. It's like if you say someone has borderline or bipolar, that's like saying your diagnosis is purple. But it's more helpful to say your diagnosis is red plus blue. And the red is usually an inborn brain thing, and the blue is usually a conditioned experience practice thing. I think the red in a lot of people might be ADHD or spectrumish in these cases. But my theory here, you guys, is it's often just plain IQ. And the doctors don't even see it because we don't see that many of these people to put the pattern together. So what are your thoughts, you guys?
Your God doesn't judge you on whether you're good or bad. It's all on how gullible you are. It doesn't matter how evil you are. All sins can be forgiven if you but believe. Absolutely. But if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter how good you are. Because the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief. Gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption. If I loved sin, I'd be a Christian.
Because there's no one left to listen. Because especially if you're white, you will be the last one affected by this.
Sometimes I think people who identify as white people don't really understand what's coming for them. Because whiteness and blackness are fungible concepts. And while a black identity in countries in which black people are a minority is informed by the marginalization of those people and the reaction that they have to that marginalization, whiteness seems to be grounded in exclusivity. Because let's take the United States. A white person from Mexico who just arrived is a Latino. They might be benefiting from the systemically structural discrimination systems that were left to them by their colonial forefathers. But in the United States, they're not white, they are Latino. And they feel that exclusion when they are in the United States. So that's the first red flag for me. But I understand that certain people who consider themselves white in the United States or white in Europe have been lulled by the expansion of the concept of whiteness that has occurred from the 19th century onwards. Because, for instance, Italians, Irish, Slavic people, Greeks, have been gradually, as whiteness has had the necessity to expand itself, to protect itself against the rising minority populations. They seem to have this idea that their acceptance to the club is now permanent. But let's go back to the Nuremberg Laws in the 1930s in Germany. Let's reflect on what happened there. The Nuremberg Laws defined what Aryan was. Dreadfully excluded their Jewish population, their black population, their Roma population. But it wasn't just them. There were white Germans that weren't considered Aryan. Because Aryan, like white, is a fuzzy concept. It's not just about the color of your skin or how tall you are. It had to do with your adherence to your set of ideas, set of practices that were both political and social. So white Germans who were disabled were not Aryan, which, associated with their vulnerability, made them the perfect targets to be the first cruelly murdered. Gay people, communists. They were white, but ideologically they weren't normative. Therefore, disabled, therefore not Aryan. And I think this is a perfect example of the ability that whiteness has to contract. And the privileges awarded to whiteness are contracting. And there are several factors that contribute to this. Economical is one of them. Because the capitalist system that was born out of colonialist exploitation, which is at the root of the creation of the concept of whiteness, doesn't have the same ability to be able to recruit the amounts of people that it needs to feed to its machine to be able to function at the predatory rates of profit that it has nowadays. And that's why things like this are happening all across the United States.
Says minors 16 years of age must be granted breaks and meal periods in the same manner as similarly permitted for employers who are 18 years of age or older. Can you tell me though, because I thought that adults, there are no requirements for adults to be able to have breaks. Where does it say that adults are required to have breaks?
Representative Cheney, you're recognized.
This refers to the same standards that the employer has, and I will remind you that it's a very difficult market right now, and as a small business owner, we bend over backwards to keep our employees happy. And 16 and 17-year-olds are very connected to each other. If they're working someplace and they're not happy with something, they'll ghost us at lunchtime. So the employers are taking care of their employees for the benefit not only of the employee, but for the need of the business.
What do white people think will happen if and when the white supremacists that they trust to defend their interests go into power. If you run a system based on exclusivity, and you manage to crush every single person that is outside of that group that is exclusive, who do you think is going to be the next group that is going to be exploited? And we're already seeing it. So if you're voting for an extreme right-wing party, deluding yourself that they somehow completely separated themselves from the white supremacy that defined them from the start, I urge you to ask this question to yourself. Is your whiteness impregnable? Are you shielded by enough wealth, social standing, power, class to be able to maintain the whiteness that you have? Are you immune from the vagaries of fate? And by which I mean, are you impervious to disablement? Because if on any of these categories you are unable to give me an answer of a resounding yes, I will tell you this. You obviously cannot be kind and empathetic and compassionate, but you can be smart. An equalitarian system that might give opportunities to all of the people that you dislike will keep you safe.
We gonna vote for who because we love sneakers?
This is connecting with Black America because they love sneakers. They're into sneakers. They love this is a big deal, certainly in the inner city. So when you have Trump roll out his sneaker line, they're like, wait a minute, this is cool. He's reaching them on a level that defies and is above politics. The culture always trumps politics. And Trump understands culture like no politician I've ever seen.
Question for you on that point, though.
Yeah.
Will the people that are excited about the sneakers and excited about Donald Trump, will that translate into them going out and voting for Donald Trump?
Well, anybody willing to put $400 down for a pair of sneakers? Yeah, I think that's commitment and love.
I hope you're right.
It's something. It's effective.
Number one, we not gonna ignore the way they've criminalized diversity, equity, and inclusion. Plus, these shoes is ugly. Number two, outside of Candace Owens and the rest of the Blexit Brigade, who do you think is going to be interested in the Air Fraud ones, the January 6s? They gold, red, white, and blue. No. Number three, ain't no way in hell y'all think the January 6s, the Air Fraud ones, is going to make us forget about how y'all have bastardized the concept of being woke that come from our culture and community. In the same sentence you talking about how this man is so equipped of understanding culture. Oh, you smoking dope and dog food. Number four, Fox News was engaging in textbook pathological race hustling. You see what I'm saying? And race baiting, talking about some black people gonna vote for us because they love sneakers. If you're willing to pay $400 for the sneakers, of course you're a vote for them. Who gonna tell them? Number five, do y'all really believe after y'all chastise my community for supporting criminals that we gonna support this criminal right here? Hell no. Number six, we standing with the watermelon state, not the apartheid state. We know where you stand at. You know what we talking about right now? That you out your goddamn mind if you believe them ugly ass sneakers will make us just forget who you really be cheeking up with. Number seven, I still ain't forgot when he said that there are fine people on both sides and the other side with some tiki torch carrying maniacs. I still ain't forgot that. And them ugly sneakers, they ain't helping no better.
Are you ready to hear some powerful words that I'm sure a lot of us go through? We're not going to waste any time and get straight to the video, man. Please listen. Please.
There's a battle going on inside of me between my well-crafted external persona and an internal force trying to break free. It's a battle, you see, between the nerd and the nigger in me. Can the nerd and the nigger coexist? They're gonna have to, nerd. But nigger, it doesn't make sense. I didn't spend 4 years in the Ivy League learning how to think, talk, and feel in order to jump into a rage every time they try and kill me. But the truth is, nerd, I always been around. When that poison ivy bullshit was beating your ass down. These strong nigger arms, they held you, told you not to feel it, gave you time enough to heal it and become a nerd again. But nigga, all you seem to feel is rage. And that will keep me out of their circles and off the front page of the New York Times and the Daily News. Not if you shoot a motherfucker. And that's my point. You are more than that cold, stony glare, those weighty Timberlands and that nappy hair. Oh, hold up now. No, nigga. That rage is like a cage that keeps love out and you in jail. Burning in nigga, thug nigga hell. Ah, shut up, nerd. You ain't heard a word I said. I gotta smack you upside your well-brushed head. Without me, there is no you. Now, wait a second, nigga. Let's talk this through. Nah, nerd, journey to the nigga in you. I've been silent long enough. I got your ass through school, gave you time enough to learn they rules. Now the time has come for you to pay your dues. Cause these little niggas in the street, they need you. But they think they can't relate cause you act all removed. When the truth is, nerd, what they are is you. Cause no matter how hard you try to deny the way you think, talk, and feel, your daddy still smoke heroin, your brother still on crack. Ghetto nightmares still haunt your dreams, and your mama is still black. I ain't saying you gotta become me, but this one thing is true. Inside you is a hard-ass nigga you gotta let come through, cause this assimilating bullshit will surely beat you down. And if you choke me long enough, my nerd, I will not stick around. Put the strut back in your walk, say what you really feel, be all of you, so all of us can heal. The time for lying and denying is through. It's time, nerd, journey to the nigga in you.
Boy, if you did not understand the message, it went straight over your head. Straight over your head. But I hope you caught the gems he was dropping. Please, don't try to separate the two, man. At the end of the day, we are what we are. Don't run from it. Embrace it.
The internet is a weird place. This is a new thing that people are doing. People are using copy and pasted duplicate content on Quora and Reddit to show up #1 on Google above the websites that they copied the content from. This was reported on the search engine optimization subreddit over here. This guy said his content was copied exactly 100% onto Quora. Previously, he was ranking well on Google for it. Then it was copied onto Quora, and now Quora is ranking above him with the same content that was copied. Google has algorithms for detecting duplicate content, so this shouldn't be possible. But the theory in this Reddit thread is that Quora and Reddit's domain authority is so high that anything that they publish will rank above the original. It gets even darker. This guy says you could just steal other people's content, post it onto Quora and Reddit, take out your competitors' links, and put in your own links, and use this content to target the keywords of your choice. This is a variation of something called parasite SEO, but now it's done with stolen content. Typically, Google will rank Quora and Reddit content only if the content performed well on Quora and Reddit, and the thread says that you can buy upvotes to your stolen posts, and that's enough to get the job done. This shouldn't be possible, and this thread is saying it's happening in abundance.
Every time you try to criticize the police, people get the exact same response. This is a dangerous job. If you don't like it, you do it. Okay, bet. I'm going to start naming jobs I've done that had more fatalities than being a police officer. #1, being a public school student. It's not funny, is it? There were over 300 school shootings in 2022 alone, with over 330 victims. The entire police force across the country, there were less than 50 firearm deaths last year. Now, somebody in the back of the class can be like, it's more than just getting shot at. You know, it's about violence, assault. You know what, gang? You're right. So I decided to look it up. According to the FBI, about 8% of all police officers last year experienced violent assault. According to the National Center for Women in Policing, somewhere between 30 and 40% of all wives, children, and spouses of police officers experience domestic violence yearly. That means just being in close relationship with a police officer is 4 to 5 times more dangerous than being a police officer. Those are the real heroes. Speaking of real heroes, pet shop employees have somewhere between a 12 and 14% serious injury rate. Police officers are about 11, but it drops down to about 7 if you subtract reckless driving and automobile accidents, right? So that means boots on the ground, you have about a 2 times higher likelihood of experiencing serious injury working at a pet shop. Now, if I were to go to my local shift at a Petco with an AR-15 on my hip and bust 15 rounds into the first labradoodle that jumps at me, y'all would call me a psychopath. If I were to say, well, I was in danger, I was scared for my health, nobody would ever justify that. There would literally be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of letters to my local Petco demanding reform. That's interesting, but I'll free the guys.
If I turn around and I see my husband on his phone, I just want to kill him because
I'm pretty sure we can all agree with that, but she's going to change your mind. Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, I will tag her. Keep watching.
What if your life right now, exactly as it's playing out, could be experienced by you as absolute perfection? Even if you feel like it's all awful right now, you're struggling at home or whatever the reality is in your life, it's all perfect.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Vanessa. I'm sort of struggling a little bit with the last point you touched on, which was that all situations are perfect. And just something was on my head going, just as an example, a very quick example, with our son's soccer match. And, you know, I want to be present when I'm there watching them, obviously. But if I turn around and I see my husband on his phone, I just want to kill him because I want him to be present. I honestly don't think it's a perfect situation. And I'm looking at ways as to how do I just not kill him, and then think I know that if I say something he's gonna get the shits, and then I'm gonna start fighting, and then we're gonna end up fighting, and he's not, and none of us are gonna be watching the game, and he's like, oh, like, you know, so
wow,
yeah. All that as a matter of seconds.
So you're my favorite. And do you see how your belief is your husband should pay attention to your son's soccer game?
Yes.
That is your belief.
Yes.
How do you feel when you believe the thought that he should and he isn't?
I get mad, upset.
You get mad and upset. What else?
And I think that it's not fair that the very limited time that we have to share with them, he's not present.
You get mad, you get upset, you think he's selfish.
Yes. Correct.
How old are you when you're like that?
5, 6.
You are. You've gone into your regressed self. When you're triggered, you'll know it because you'll be feeling fear, frustration, panic, shame, disappointment, impatience, anger. You're no longer 42 or 56 or 39. When you feel those things, you have literally left the building. You are regressed. You are 5 or 4 or 3. How are you going to respond to your spouse when you're 4 and you're angry? You're going to have a tantrum, right? Did you know that if you react with a tantrum, it fixes everything? And so when you're regressed and you act out of that regressed kind of place, you tend to kind of make a mess of things. Your challenge is to go inside, tend to self, tend to wound, be for you. Get that sorted and settled in whatever way you need to, and then you can be present, confident, peaceful, and understanding, and grounded, and empathetic, and really seeing the other for who they truly are, not for the story that you've made up about them. And when you can do that, you get to be for other exactly what was required in the moment. And so we're going to turn the thought around. Your husband should not pay attention to your son's soccer game. Why is that more true?
Why is that more true?
I'm going to tell you why. Because that's what's happening. And you can argue with reality, but you will be wrong 100% of the time. You want to make your life miserable? Argue with reality, right?
Yeah,
you're just going to live your life being wrong all the time, and you're going to hate that you have to marinate in the wrongness of self constantly. And so your husband should not be paying attention to your child's game because he's not. That's the first reason we know that that's more true than he should. The second reason that we know it's more true that your husband should not be paying attention to your child's soccer game is so that you get triggered.
Yes.
He invites you to do your work. You are meant to be married to this man who makes you crazy around how he's dividing up his time because it's getting you. Isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, so good.
Yeah.
And so he's your friendly soul. You say thank you.
Thank you.
And so now you do your work. Right? Now you figure out what part of you is getting all flapped about this. Is it the part of you that feels that if you don't have the attention of another, you're not valued? And do you then project that onto your kid so that he's going to feel that in his relationship with dad? And then you go into fear of future and fear of past and all these other things are happening. And it's no longer about the fact that he's on his screen when he should be present in the moment, right? It's not even about that now. You just travel down into your subconscious self and you're at the effect of all of that. So you work all of that first. And once you've worked it, there may come a time when you step in and you go great mother on him. This will stop. Are we clear? And I love you, and I know you're busy, and I know you have lots going on, and this is not working for our family. And so there are moments when you great mother it, or for the dads in the room, great father it, and you step in and you say, no, done, and here's why. But it's not every moment, because that's not true power. That's fear-based, egoic responding.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're my favorite.
I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like everyone around me is doing something great, and I look on social media and somebody bought a new car or a new house, or they moved out, or they moved to another city or a country or traveling or whatever, and I'm not doing that. I don't know how to, There was a Mexican fisherman who was fishing on his pier one day. A man from Harvard comes up to him, an investment banker, and he says, how many fish do you catch a day? The fisherman replies, I catch about 10 fish a day. Okay, so he's a fisherman. He says, well, what do you do with the rest of your time? I said, well, I hang out with my wife, I hang out with my kids, I go for a walk sometimes, play the guitar, oh, and I also like to sleep in. The investment banker then responds and says, you know what you could be doing? You could stay out here a little bit longer, catch a little bit more fish, and then with the money that you make from catching those more fish, get a boat, and then with that boat, you can catch even more fish. And you get more money. Then what you can do is you can take all the money that you're making from your boat, live in a city, hire a bunch of people, and really build an empire. What a crazy opportunity. The fisherman responds, well, then what? Like, what would I do? How long would it take? He says, well, it'll take about 10 to 15 years. You'd create your company, and then you'd sell it. You'd make so much money. Did he take it? The fisherman says, well, that sounds nice. I'd make a lot of money. Well, then what do I do? He says, well, that's the best part. You can do whatever you want. As a matter of fact, once you've done all that, you'd be able to go back to Mexico, fish a little bit, hang out with your wife, spend time with your kids, play the guitar. Oh, and you could sleep in a little bit. Yeah, but isn't that the exact same thing that he was... Wow. All to say that sometimes less is more. Sometimes you already have everything that you need. You just are focused on the wrong thing. Just be you.
In a 1986 study by Colin and Desor at the University of Nancy, France, the two behavioral biologists conducted an experiment where they placed groups of 6 rats in a cage, and that cage was set up so that the rats would have to swim underwater to fetch food from a food dispenser, and then swim back to the dry part of the cage with the other rats in order to eat the food. And every time they ran the experiment, it quickly appeared that not all the rats were swimming to fetch their food, because in every group of 6 rats, a similar social division emerged. 2 rats who were good at swimming would become the foragers, 2 rats who weren't so good at swimming but were quite good at stealing would bully the foragers into giving them their food and force them to swim back to feed themselves. And in each group, there tended to be 1 rat that was good at swimming, but strong enough to not be bullied by the other rats. And there was also the weakest rat who would feed off the crumbs left by everyone else. And what's interesting is that when they took all the foragers from different groups and put them together in a cage, once the flooding of the cage started, the same social structure emerged. So 2 former foragers became the bullies, 1 former forager became independent, and 1 former forager became the outcast. And guess what happened when they put all the bullies together? The same structure emerged again once the stressful situation was applied to the group. And then they reproduced the experiment with bigger groups, up to 200, and the same structure emerged. The only difference seemed to be that the bigger the group, the more violent the interaction to maintain that social structure would be. So what does that rat experiment tell us? That there was nothing inherently bully or forager or outcast about an individual rat. Their social position depends on the group of rats as a whole. That's social determinism. But also that social structure of oppression itself only emerges in a situation of stress. Now, what blows my mind about this is that when the scientists dissected the rat's brain, they found that the brains that exhibited the highest markers of stress were not the brains of the outcast, not the brains of the foragers who were being exploited. It was the brains of the bullies. Think about it. In this situation, the oppressor rats were the most stressed because they were the ones who depended the most on the other rats and on the system that served them, and also the ones who had the most to lose if their status was challenged. Now, if we were to extrapolate that to human society, you may not want to do that, but I choose to. We can learn from this that the oppressor is stuck in a negative feedback loop. The more they're oppressed, the more those who they oppress would appear as a threat to them, which itself justifies further oppression that only feeds the oppressor's psychosis. And at some point somebody needs to stop the oppressor, because the oppressor structurally cannot know peace until they stop oppressing. I'll let you figure out which situation this lesson applies to.
It's dystopic and almost Capital Core, the way that fashion houses drape celebrities in designer clothing, and they walk the red carpet to advertise that luxury brand. Now, of course, that is reducing the celebrity's likeness to a mannequin, but instead it is reframed as prestigious and exclusive, that the celebrity is important enough to have fashion brands sponsoring them. Entertainment-based celebrity is integral to capitalism because entertainment is part of the bread and circuses that keep the underclasses ultimately oppressed. So award shows are broadcasted events where celebrities can mimic the aesthetic of the multi-billionaire class, but it is just a loan. Basically, entertainers cosplay excessive wealth, and what I mean by that is they are not themselves the multi-billionaires. They are instead allowed a conditional access into the bottom ranks of the elite classes to be the infantry, so they can advertise that elite lifestyle. Although to the underclasses, celebrities and ultra-billionaires have roughly an equal amount of wealth, there is a strata of hierarchies even within the upper classes, and celebrities are meant to market elitism to the masses. If a kind of peasant revolt were to ensue against the elite classes, celebrities are the infantry, the first line of fire, because they are publicly visible with their wealth. Interestingly, award shows are a kind of MCU multiverse, but with celebrities. More and more it is evident that these award shows are garish and lurid exhibitions of how celebrities are detached from the everyday commoner. And I think that award shows, the luster of it, is fading. Like how ironically classless award shows like the Golden Globes have devolved into. But in truth, celebrities are meant to interact, socialize, and romance each other. It is built into the institution of Hollywood. There used to be Hollywood arranged marriages, for instance. To be a celebrity is to be locked in a diorama, to be a microcosm of the elites without really being an elite yourself. We are invested in the factional disputes and alliances of celebrities in this social realm rather than analyzing, for instance, our own political structure. Celebrity gossip, the churning rumor mill, and all of the pomp and circumstances that occur at these award shows are reported as news, as just as newsworthy as what's going on in our government. In this way, we can draw a parallel to the Hunger Games, that celebrities are victors, that they are granted access into this elite lifestyle, although increasingly celebrities are already part of the elite classes. But regardless, they are meant to be expendable, disposable, and if there is ever to be a class revolution, you're supposed to go after them and not the ultra-billionaires.
So the role of the Democrats in the current system is to intentionally lose. I hope you'll let me explain, because as we navigate the tricky intersectional ethics of the upcoming 2024 election and beyond, it's important that we begin to understand this in our bones. 50 years ago, the U.S. had two political parties, Republicans and Democrats, and both had genuine public support, and both platforms held some public appeal. And then the right wing realized that there was unimaginable money to be made from corporate campaign funding, so they abandoned their entire platform and dedicated themselves completely to allowing the exploitation of the environment and the working class to give every single penny to the ultra-rich. Paid really well, but there was no way they were going to win elections with that as a platform, because it amounted to a giant middle finger to the working class and their voter base, so they needed to mobilize a new voter base. They looked at a few options and settled on evangelical fundamentalist Christians, who were previously pretty apolitical. In order to buy their votes, the Republican Party turned on a dime in the 1980s and became rabidly pro-life. Before this, the Republicans were openly pro-choice, because abortion is a personal right, and they were the party advocating personal rights. This marked the start of the modern culture wars, where the right invents boogeymen to terrify their base into ignoring the fact that their entire platform is basically steal all your money and give it to the rich, while destroying the environment we live in. The Democrats quickly followed suit, starting with Clinton. They also abandoned any actual representation of their base for corporate cash grabs, including massively lucrative arms deals and warmongering, in order to funnel billions through the Pentagon into their corporate funders' pockets. So the only two major political parties in the most powerful country in the history of the world both completely sold out to corporate interests some 30 to 40 years ago, which has led to an ever-widening gap between public opinion and legislation. For example, polling shows that some 70% of Americans have wanted some form of universal health care for decades, but it's barred from even being seriously discussed. Citizens of the U.S. are shockingly aligned on most major issues. We all want the rich to pay taxes, not to watch our neighbors and families die from easily preventable medical issues, living wages, fair elections, breathable air, and not bombing of babies. Corporations want the exact opposite, or more accurately, they want the record-breaking profits they can extract from the opposite. This creates a real quandary for both Republicans and Democrats alike. How do you continue to get votes while aggressively working against everything your voters want? You already know the answer. They stage a farce where they pretend to be bitter enemies, and like any abuser, they both claim that they are the only ones who can keep you safe from the other. The Republicans pretend that they are the only thing preventing straight white Christians from being hunted for sport by hordes of black and brown trans drug dealers screaming pronouns and making up new genders. The Democrats pretend that they are the only ones who can save you from the coal-guzzling fascists literally storming the Capitol. The fact that one boogeyman is totally fictional and the other is very real doesn't change their tactical exploitation and the presentation of themselves as your only hope at all. And they've gotten really good at this dance. They do a great job at it now. They look genuinely enraged at each other as they denounce the other side of the aisle, while all of them vote unanimously for the same tax cuts for the rich and bloated military budgets and genocides that line their funders' pockets. The Republicans have it easy. Their platform of culture war has no relationship to their corporate funders, so when they get into office, they can do most of what they say they will. They'll criminalize abortion, defund social services, cut taxes, but only on the rich, never for you, institute a brutal police state, terrorize immigrants and LGBTQ people. The Democrats have a real problem, though. Their nominal platform is at odds with their corporate sponsors, so they do the only logical thing from that position. They intentionally lose. Every time they make a catch, win an election, they intentionally fumble the ball. We're all so used to seeing this farcical dance that we can't even really register it anymore, but the Democrats have had the Senate, House, and presidency simultaneously multiple times in the last few decades. At any one of those times, they could have actually made change. They could have codified Roe versus Wade. They could have passed legislation eliminating all student debt. They could have cut military spending, taxed the rich, passed universal health care. They could have capped emissions and maintained a livable environment. Our country and world could be very, very different than it is. It really doesn't have to be like this. But if they did those things, they would then gain massive public support and actually run the country, but they would lose all their corporate funding. So that's not actually what they want. So they keep this incredibly fragile balance, where since the Clinton years, where the Democrats sold out, the balance of power has been carefully maintained at almost exactly 50-50, giving both parties the ability to point the finger and blame the other for not getting anything done. It didn't used to be like that. The party that better represented the will of the population used to just win and then do what the people wanted. Like the 75th Congress, some 90 years ago, was 344 to 88. Because the Democrats, who held the 344, maintained a 95% tax on the rich and actually subsidized social services and education. If today's Democrats simply adopted the platform of their own party from 90 years ago, they would win every election in a landslide. But they actively don't want to win. For many of us millennials, this was really driven home by the 2016 election cycle. Polls were crystal clear. In every single poll, Bernie Sanders beat Trump by double digits and Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. The DNC pulled out all the stops. They lied, cheated, stole so much in order to force Sanders out and put Clinton up as the candidate that it was impossible not to see it. It looked insane to many of us. We felt crazy. I remember literally watching them kick Sanders delegates out for asking questions that they didn't want to answer at the Democratic National Convention in Maine. I remember watching them shut down polling places where Sanders had strong leads. All the things that the MAGA thinks happened in the 2020 election, the DNC literally did and didn't even bother to hide in 2016. They were taken to court for it, and they didn't even deny that they rigged the primary. They just said, hey, we're a private company. We're under zero obligation to run fair elections. We can nominate whoever we want. The voting is just a farce. That was their legal argument, and they won with it. I remember hearing people scream at the DNC officials, do you want to lose? And slowly understanding that, yeah, that was exactly what they wanted. They would literally rather lose with Clinton than win with Sanders. Because when they lose, they can then say, gosh darn it, we tried, but they won this round. Please donate more. They get to look like the good guys who keep trying but just keep getting beaten down by the forces of fascism and racism and hate. As losers, they're noble victims. But when they win, they have real problems like what we're seeing now with Biden, where they have to try and hide the fact that they are also the forces of fascism and racism and hate. If Trump had won, he'd likely be doing the exact same thing, but it would be normal. We'd all expect it, and the DNC would fundraise like crazy. When a Democrat commits genocide, though, we're supposed to see it as atypical. Unflinchingly committing genocide is supposed to read as, oh, a little oopsie from an otherwise ethical humanitarian democratic leader. The fact that the Republican platform doesn't interfere with their corporate interests and therefore they can enact the policies they promise to, while the Democrats have to constantly appear to fumble and fail in their oh-so-genuine efforts to create change has, of course, led to the rightward drift of U.S. politics over the last decades, to the point where Republican elected officials are now openly saying out loud that we should kill all Palestinians, while the House just voted near unanimously that anyone who says we should not commit genocide must be anti-Semitic. That shift is noteworthy. If any politician had stood up and publicly said that we should kill all of a given race 50 years ago, they would have rightfully been called a Nazi and lost all public credulity. Today, that's accepted on the floor of a state house, while opposing genocide is condemned and literally censured. That's pretty intense, and it's like that across the board. The only thing that matters in political discourse is controlling the parameters of the narrative. What is outside the bounds on each side? If you control these two bookends, then the content of what is said in between them becomes wholly irrelevant. Both bookends have been steadily shifting to the right for a long time, to the point where now right-wing politicians openly advocate ethnic cleansing, and left-wing politicians just quietly fund ethnic cleansing. And anything to the left of funding ethnic cleansing is literally censured. Remember how 100 years ago the Democrats controlled like 80% of Congress and they taxed the rich at 95% in a way that gave the U.S. the strongest economy in the history of the world? Now, if any elected official is crazy enough to suggest that the rich should pay any taxes at all, they're labeled as communists and laughed out of the room. So I paid more taxes than Jeff Bezos last year. The cost of living's through the roof, federal minimum wage is still $7.25, and we're watching our tax dollars bomb babies. But the Democrats, who are currently the ones bombing babies, are our saviors. And if we just vote for them a little bit more, then they'll save us all. Most notable in all of this is that if anyone speaks up who actually represents the will of the American people, they're mocked and driven out of the conversation. So people like Claudia de la Cruz or Cornel West are effectively barred from any presence in the mainstream media, or if they are covered, it's as an anomaly and immediately condemned as stealing votes from the real candidates. Notice that framing. It's not that Biden or Trump are losing through their complete failure to represent anything like what the people want. It's that anyone who represents what the people want is stealing votes from them. If you'd like to understand the mechanisms and expressions of this political narrative of control better, I can't recommend Chomsky enough. Since reading his masterwork, Manufacturing Consent, a Propaganda Model of the Media, I have never seen the world the same way. That book is dense, but he covers the same content in a much more digestible fashion in the 1988 CBC Massey Lectures titled Necessary Illusions, which is also in print as a book by the same name. But that's a 4-hour lecture set from 35 years ago, and it's worth every second. But don't take my word for it. Just watch and look at the track record. If the Democrats wanted to win, they'd do what 75% of the country wants and stop funding genocide and enact a ceasefire. But they're doing the exact opposite, and it may very well have the effect of putting Trump back into office. As you watch that play out, or whatever the next scenario is where the Democrats fail or look wildly inept, just remember this video and compare what you're seeing to the idea that they want to lose. If they wanted to win, we all know how they could. They're not doing that. So ask yourself what priorities would lead to their actual ineffective course of action, and whether those priorities align with yours, your neighbors, and those of everyone who wants a safe, livable world.
This is 4D Miner, a 4-dimensional survival sandbox game. I'd rather not start this video off with an explanation, so instead, I'm just going to show it to you. First, let's quickly make a new world. After the world generates, you'll notice a very familiar, blocky-looking landscape. But there's more to this world than meets the eye. As I scroll with the mouse wheel, the landscape appears to transform. Blocks seem to contort into all kinds of different shapes, while some seem to appear out of thin air, and others slowly disappear. Even the sun appears to grow and shrink. This kind of behavior is not unusual when 3-dimensional beings like you and me try to interact with a 4-dimensional world. In order to explain what's happening here, let's look at what happens when a 2-dimensional being tries to interact with a 3-dimensional world. Let me introduce you to Frank. Frank is a 2-dimensional being, restricted to a 2-dimensional plane, and therefore cannot see anything beyond the 2nd dimension. Much like how we cannot directly see anything beyond the 3rd dimension. Luckily for Frank, we 3-dimensional beings have the technology to give him a glimpse into the 3rd dimension. We can allow him to explore a 2-dimensional slice of the 3D world around him. In addition to this, we can give him a superpower that allows him to rotate his cross-sectional plane in the 3rd dimension, which lets him explore anywhere he wants in his new 3D environment. When Frank uses his superpower, to him it looks like the landscape is completely transforming. The blocks around him seem to change shape, appear, and even disappear. To us, what Frank sees makes perfect sense. We can look at him trying to explore different cross-sections of the 3D world around him. We can see him get stuck inside a cave, and while the way out seems obvious to us, it's not so easy for him. This is exactly what happens to us when we try to explore a 4-dimensional world. Imagine you're in your living room, minding your own business, when suddenly, a being from the 4th dimension snatches you away. Next thing you know, they place you into a totally different world. A 4-dimensional world. Now you're completely out of your element, and your only hope is a magical dial they give you that lets you rotate yourself through the 4th dimension. That's basically the scenario you'll find yourself in when playing this game. The first thing you'll want to do is get some kind of weapon, because while we can only see a limited 3D cross-section of the world.
When your child is having a meltdown, here's what you should do. When your child is having an emotional crisis, they're experiencing neurophysiological changes, thoughts and feelings of displeasure. It's an incredibly scary situation for them. So shouting at them or telling them to stop their emotional outburst because you feel angry or embarrassed is far from helpful. So hold them and make them feel safe when they're going through this turmoil. Let them vent their anger and frustration on you. Then get them to label their emotion. This will help them to recognize and understand the sensation in future. Manage how you deal with your emotions, because that's what they'll be copying. You don't need more information, you need implementation. Your frustration and depression comes from knowing what to do, but not doing it. Every time you bail out of doing the thing you need to do, you chip away at your confidence and self-esteem, because you can't trust yourself. This has nothing to do with the fact you aren't trying hard enough or want it bad enough. It's down to experiential avoidance, avoiding thoughts, feelings, memories, physical sensation, and other experiences, even when doing so causes harm in the long term. Avoidance, doing the boring work, the painful workout, the uncomfortable conversation, the scary decision, is keeping you from the treasure you seek.
If you feel it in your chest, it's fear. If you feel it in your stomach, it's your intuition. If you feel it throughout your body, it's happiness. If you feel it in your head, it's anger. If you feel it in your muscles, it's anxiety. If you feel it in your face, it's shame. If you feel it in your mouth, it's disgust. If you feel it in your throat, it's sadness.
I cannot allow you to say 15 things that are unfactual and not be challenged on them. I'm happy to let you talk, but I'm going to ask clarifying questions.
You're going to tell me what's factual? Mark,
yes,
I spent 5 years of my life studying this, living it. When was the last time you were in Gaza, Mark? When was the last time you were in Gaza?
18 months ago. When was the last time you were in Gaza? When was the last time you were in Gaza?
A few years ago.
Okay, so you said Al-Shifa Hospital has been proven Hamas headquarters. What independent reference, what source, what investigation has proven that? Who has proven that it's an Al-Shifa hospital since it's been a proven fact? Who proved it?
So now we're going to get into this basic like Holocaust denying idea that evidence that Israel has shown is not valid. I mean, is that what you're doing? Do you deny that people were raped?
Everybody that challenges you is not doing Holocaust denial. You said that it's a Hamas headquarters. I simply asked you for evidence of it. I said who, and you immediately equated it to Holocaust denial.
Israel has presented evidence. Ask the CIA. Ask anybody who studies
the CIA,
this.
sir.
Yeah. You don't trust the government. You don't trust the American government. You don't trust the Israeli government. Who should we trust? Hamas? You want to trust Hamas? Go ahead, trust Hamas. Okay. The people that destroy lives day and night.
Here's the point. David, here's the point. Under Article 8 of the Rome Statute and under Article 33 of the 1949 Geneva Convention, international law forbids the targeting of civilians. Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay. Would you agree that targeting a refugee camp that has children in it and adults who are non-Hamas members, who are not actors in the military, would constitute targeting a civilian?
I completely disagree with that. Completely disagree. If Israel is targeting Hamas in a refugee camp and it's pinpointing its attacks on Hamas, and there is collateral damage, there's collateral damage. That's war. That's called war. W-A-R. That's what it is.
So here's the challenge, David. Israel argues that Hamas is everywhere in Gaza, that they're under every hospital, that they're in every university, that they're in every refugee camp. You agree with that, right? We can agree to that.
No, Israel does not think they're everywhere. Israel thinks that they are where they are. And those are in many, but not all, civilian locations.
So the challenge is, by that logic, virtually every civilian location is vulnerable and viewed as a legitimate target. And so what happens is thousands of innocent people die. Again, when you bomb a refugee camp, there's no reason to believe that it's the only way to get at a Hamas target. When a hospital is bombed, there's no reason to believe that's the only way to do this. And if you know that the quote-unquote collateral damage, as you call it, is thousands of civilians, then yes, it seems like an improper thing. But again, it's not just me saying this. The UN, the International Red Cross, all of these bodies, including outside of the UN, who you said you don't respect, they also agree that these are war crimes. So why does the entire international community believe that these are war crimes and not you?
So, because I think I have an unbiased view, and I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the world. Okay? There's a lot of anti-Israel behavior in the world. But let me ask you a question, Mark. Israel gets...
Hey, you are not in trouble. If you have a constant fear that you've done something wrong, this self-blaming narrative is really common for people who grew up in environments where conflict was just brushed under the rug. A parent screams, slams doors, and there's no acknowledgement of what happened. There's no repair after the fact. In order for a child to make sense of this, they use self-blame as a coping mechanism. I caused bad things to happen. I must be bad at my core. It feels so much easier for the child to believe that they are bad than to fathom that they could feel unsafe with their parent.
Submission is your husband's need. Sometimes I think we have a lack of understanding of our husband's needs, that he actually needs us. My kids are messy, demanding. At times, they're often disobedient. I understand how much they need me, and here's the deal. I continue to serve them despite what they give me. What do my kids give me? They give me drama, chaos, messy house, laundry, all the things, sleepless nights. But guess what? I continue to serve them, and I live my life in such a way to meet their needs, not according to their behavior, but regardless of their behavior. Using motherhood as an example, we as women will sometimes treat our children, our sons, as if they can do no wrong, but when it comes to our husbands, it seems they can't do anything right. We are naggy, negative, and we neglect their need of respect based off their performance, and that is not okay. Truth be told, they are someone's son. You know what's helped me love him is I look at Bubba, and I think one day he's not perfect, and he's not going to be perfect, and I pray that his wife will be able to look in his eyes even when he fails and even when he messes up and calls out who he's created to be. Doesn't look at him and call him names and belittle him and use her words to destroy him, but calls the life that is inside of him and the future and the hope that comes in knowing Jesus. And so that's how I view him. How would I want Bubba's wife to talk to him?
This video is probably one of the best depictions of solar punk. It's a future where we merge future technology with ecocentric values, and we thrive in harmony with nature. The combination of these words kind of immediately make you think of a cult. And why is that? The punk in both solar punk and cyberpunk refers to rebellion. Cyberpunk is against an oppressive techno-dystopia, and solar punk is against consumerism and capitalism, which is leading to the destruction of the planet. The solar is both literal and metaphorical. Literally, it represents solar and other renewable energies, and metaphorically, it's talking about this beacon of light in a dark cyberpunk world run by corporate interests. There are films and video games out there that fit the solar punk aesthetic, but they don't quite fit the true definition of solar punk when it comes to the social or cultural aspects.
Hey, baby, dude.
Why are you smiling at me like that?
Because you're smiling at me.
So you matching my energy, huh?
That's hot.
That's hot. Likes that. Anyway, before we go, I got to tell you something.
Tell me what.
I learned how to laugh without smiling.
You did not.
I did. And I want to show you, but first, you got to tell me a good joke. Second, if I can prove to you that I can do this, you got to leave me alone for the rest of the weekend because the NBA just started and I'm trying to watch all the games. NFL's ongoing. You know how that is. So do we have a deal?
And if you can't do it, then you don't get to watch none of that and you get to just spend time with me.
Okay. Just tell me a joke so I can...
Okay, why can't you trust the king of the jungle?
Why not?
Because he always be lying.
Thank you. My name is Spike Cohen. I don't recall the First Amendment coming with a 3-minute time limit, but that's okay. I shouldn't even need that long. I'm here to speak on behalf of Erica Brown and Be Kind, Be Great, and all of the other residents of your community who are out helping people as they're being told by the city government that there's a problem with that. We've heard, Howard, you were one of them, we've heard some of you on the news saying that they're creating a hazard and that they're making a mess. And yet, when Be Kind, Be Great goes out and feeds people, they leave the place cleaner than they found it. You called them a nuisance. I don't think a person helping another person and giving them food is a nuisance. I think when someone shows up and lies about them and threatens them with fines or jail time, I think that's a nuisance. Now, what wasn't mentioned in your declaration about the plan that you're offering, what you didn't mention is it comes with fees. So you're now telling people who out of the goodness of their own heart are trying to help members of your community in need that before they can spend a single penny to give a single morsel to someone who needs it, they got to pay you off first. Now, I don't think a single one of you outside of your capacity as a government official, I don't think a single one of you, if you were on the other side of this dais, would dare to go out there to someone who's feeding someone else and say, this is a nice little charity you got here. Be a real shame if something were to happen to it. Maybe if you do it the way I tell you to and you give me a little piece of it, I'll let you keep doing it. And maybe if not, we'll have some trouble. I don't think a single one of you would do that. I don't think any of you are sociopaths. I don't think any of you are protection racketeers or mobsters. I think what happens is you get on that side of the table and you tell yourself that you're just doing your jobs. Well, if that were actually true, then your jobs are objectively evil. You should quit them and find something better to do. I don't think that's your job. I think you can choose to do your job differently and treat them with the same level of respect that you treat them with on this side of the table. And so what I'm here proposing, and this might sound crazy, is for you to act on that side of the dais as you would on this side of the dais and let people help people who are in need. Whichever you choose, I'm going to make sure, as I do in cities across the country, that millions of people know what you chose. I hope that the thousands upon thousands of those who contact you about it will be congratulating you on choosing to be a hero and not giving their thoughts on you, instead being a nuisance. See you soon.
When a child first lies, it usually happens when they're pretty little and they just don't know. So they think that they can just pass that off because they still have some confusion around reality and fantasy. So we give them a little bit of a pass right at the beginning. And then we start to hold them accountable. And as they get older, especially into those preteen years, when we know that we've got to trust what comes out of their mouth in order to let them be teenagers. So you want to be a teenager, you're going to have to be honest with me. When that happens and we find that they've said something that's not truthful, we get scared because we think, how am I going to trust you? So our number one strategy that we usually pull out is, I can deal with anything you've done, but if you lie about it, you're going to be in twice the trouble, right? So we try to up the ante for that, which doesn't necessarily reduce lying. All it really does is help them know that they better be really good at it. So, if I get caught at the lie, that's going to be worse, so I'm going to make sure that I cover my bases completely. Why do we lie? That's really the question. Not they lied and that's a disruption in the trust that we have in our relationship, but why would you lie? And for each of us, we all know we've had those moments when a lie has popped out of our mouth, perhaps without our even consciously realizing we just did it. And there are several reasons why, so I'm going to just pick one. One of the reasons we lie is because we're completely embarrassed about what actually happened. I can't face the dismantling of myself in front of you because you will see me as less than who I want to be, and that's too much of a hardship on me. So I want to preserve what you believe about me by telling you what you want to hear. And so I'm going to hold back what actually happened. And so when we say it didn't happen that way, it really happened this way, what we're really saying is, I wish it had happened this way. So as a parent, what we can do when we catch them in that lie is to say, it seems like if you had it to do over again, you would go back and choose differently. And it's wise of you to know that. It's also important that you let me know that, because you can trust that I'm going to help you through that rather than judge you through it. But then we've got to mean it. We've got to help them through. That must have felt so horrible that you didn't even want me to know it. So how might you do it differently the next time? We've got to bring that instead of, what were you thinking? So decide, do you want your kids to tell you the truth? Then be gentle with their little personalities right then, because they're already challenged.
Ugh, why does everything need to be my responsibility? What are you talking about? I'm talking about how if I don't do the dishes, then they don't get done. Oh my gosh, I did the dishes 2 nights ago. Don't act like I never do them. You didn't do the dishes. I had 90% of them washed before dinner is even done. Well, I still get credit for washing whatever was in the sink. Credit? Why do you deserve a cookie for doing the bare minimum? You don't give me any credit for doing them every other night. Oh my gosh. This is one of those moments, isn't it? What? This is one of those moments they talked about in counseling. We're not actually fighting about the dishes, are we? It feels like we're fighting about the dishes. Well, yeah, but it's deeper than that, isn't it? This is about what the dishes represent. It's about trust. It's about you feeling disconnected and looking for reassurance that I love you and don't want you to feel taken for granted or neglected. Right. But instead of being honest and vulnerable and saying that, I came to you heated and critical and accused you, which led you to feeling attacked and blamed, didn't it? Exactly. And then I immediately got defensive and invalidated your feelings, which led you to feeling even more unheard and alone than before, which made me just want to escalate the conflict to actually be heard. And then I would have just felt even more justified to dismiss your accusations because I couldn't see the hurt underneath them. And we get caught in this cycle where we're missing each other, just like the counselor said, right? And neither of us are being respectful or taking accountability. I don't want to do that anymore. You matter more to me than any fight that we have. Yeah, you too. And I'm going to figure out how to be a safe place for you to be vulnerable because we're a team in this. And I love you. And I'm going to stop coming at you heated and critical because I love you too. Babe, did we do it? Are we actually resolving conflict?
Show me how long it takes you to order at a counter, and I will show you your bank account.
Fly.
But I was at a counter, like one does, a coffee shop or something, and there's always a lady in front of you, right? And the lady in front of you takes 4 centuries to order a coffee and a muffin. What I realized very quickly is, if you want to get something done, you give it to a busy person, is the saying. That's why they say you should take somebody to dinner before you hire them or take them out to lunch, see how they treat the staff. But I also think, see how quickly they make decisions, because people who take forever to order when they stand in line, one, are really comfortable inconveniencing somebody else around them, which means they have limited self-awareness, maybe borderline narcissism. And then simultaneously, they're not very efficient at the things that don't really matter. That coffee order does not really matter. And so if we know we are here for a finite amount of time, why spend so much time on that as opposed to a walk, a sunset, etc.?
You really didn't like this lady, did you?
Not true. Here's what happens, guys. Do me a favor, okay? I'm going to pour this into this glass, and I want you to tell me when to stop. Deal? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Stop.
Keep going.
Mm-hmm. Stop.
Okay. So what? So
I'll drink that.
fellas, let's wait. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna clean it up, fellas. One conversation. All eyes up here, okay?
Excuse me.
Now, fellas, this right here represents us. And what happens is we take in everything that we experience throughout the day, right? But because us as young men, we keep it in. Listen, fellas, trying to be tough, we don't let it out, we don't talk about it, we keep it in, what eventually happens?
You overflow.
We overflow and then we make a mess. Now this is just water, but a mess could be we cuss the teacher out. A mess could be we got in a fight with our friend. Does everybody understand that? So as young men, we have to find safe places that we can talk about what we are going through and what we're feeling. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Everybody got that?
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all did a great job today. Now clean this water up, man.
What? Nah, bro. Nah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about it in two ways, okay? So your personality, literally, Ed, is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel is your personality, and your personality is intimately connected to your personal reality, your life. So then if you want to change your life, your personal reality, you got to change your personality. And here we go again. You got to start becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts. You got to start noticing how you act, how you speak. You got to pay attention to how you're feeling. Some people would live in guilt their whole entire life and don't even know it's guilt because at least it feels like them. So then when you start doing that, you begin to objectify your subjective self. So then when you begin to make small changes, back to thought, a new thought should lead to a new choice. A new choice should lead to a new behavior. A new behavior should create a new experience, and a new experience should create a new emotion. And that new emotion is teaching your body chemistry.